The Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams. Part 1, 1887 to 1896. Continued. Our walk home to Jericho took longer than it should, because I was small, and Da liked to meander while he smoked his pipe. I loved the smell of it. We crossed the wide Banbury Road and started down St. Margaret's, past tall houses standing in pairs, with pretty gardens and trees shading the path. Then I led us on a zigzagging route through narrow streets where the houses were tightly packed, one against the other, just like slips in their pigeonholes. When we turned into Observatory Street, Da tapped his pipe clean against a wall and put it in his pocket. Then he lifted me onto his shoulders. "You'll be too big for this soon," he said. "Will I stop being a little 'un when I get too big?" "Is that what Lizzie calls you?" "It's one of the things she calls me. She also calls me Cabbage and Essie May." "Little 'un, I understand, Nessie May. But why does she call you Cabbage?" Cabbage always came with a cuddle or a kind smile. It made perfect sense, but I couldn't explain why. Our house was halfway down Observatory Street, just past Adelaide Street. When we got to the corner, I counted out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. Stop right here for our front door. We had an old brass knocker shaped like a hand. Lily had found it at a bric-a-brac stall in the covered market. Da said it had been tarnished and scratched, and there'd been river sand between the fingers, but he'd cleaned it up and attached it to the door on the day they were married. Now, he took his key from his pocket, and I leaned down and covered Lily's hand with mine. I knocked it 4 times. "No one's home," I said. "They will be soon." He opened the door, and I ducked as he stepped into the hall. Da set me down, put his satchel on the sideboard, and bent to pick the letters off the floor. I followed him down the hall and into the kitchen and sat at the table while he cooked our dinner. We had an occasional maid come 3 times a week to cook and clean and wash our clothes, but this wasn't one of her days. "Will I go into service when I stop being a little 'un?" Da jiggled the pan to turn the sausages, then looked across to where I sat at the table. "No, you won't." "Why not?" He jiggled the sausages again. It's hard to explain. I waited. He took a deep breath, and the thinking lines between his eyebrows got deeper. "Lizzie is fortunate to be in service, but for you it would be unfortunate." "I don't understand." "No, I don't suppose you do." He drained the peas and mashed the potatoes and put them on our plates with the sausages. When he finally sat at the table, he said, "Service means different things to different people, Essie, depending on their position in society. Will all the different meanings be in the dictionary?" His thinking lines relaxed. "We'll search the pigeonholes tomorrow, shall we?" Would Lily have been able to explain service? "Your mother would have had the words to explain the world to you, Essie," Da said. "But without her, we must rely on the scrippy." The next morning, before we sorted the post, Da held me up and let me search the pigeonholes containing S words. "Now, let's see what we can find." Da pointed to a pigeonhole that was almost too high, but not quite. I pulled out a bundle of slips. Service was written on a top slip, and beneath that, multiple senses. We sat at the sorting table, and Da let me loosen the string that bound the slips. They were separated into 4 smaller bundles of quotations, each with its own top slip, and a definition suggested by one of Dr. Murray's more trusted volunteers. "Edith sorted these," Da said, arranging the piles on the sorting table. "You mean Auntie Diet?" "The very same." "Is she a lexicograph like you?" "Lexicographer. No, but she is a very learned lady, and we are lucky she has taken on the dictionary as her hobby. There's not a week goes by without a letter from Dite to Dr. Murray with a word, or copy for the next section. Not a week went by when we didn't get our own letter from Dite. When Dar read them aloud, they were mostly about me. Am I her hobby too? You are her goddaughter, which is much more important than a hobby. Although Dite's real name was Edith, when I was very small I struggled to say it. There were other ways to say her name, she'd said, and she let me choose my favourite. In Denmark, she would be called Ditty. Ditty is sweeter. I sometimes thought enjoying the rhyme. I never called her Edith again. Now, let's see how Dit has defined service, Dar said. A lot of the definitions described Lizzie, but none of them explained why service might mean something different for her and for me. The last pile we looked at had no top slip. They're duplicates, Dar said. He helped me read them. What will happen to them? I asked. But before Dar could answer, the scriptorium door opened, and one of the assistants came in, knotting his tie as if he'd only just put it on. When he was done, it sat crooked, and he forgot to tuck it into his waistcoat. Mr. Mitchell looked over my shoulder at the piles of slips laid out on the sorting table. A wave of dark hair fell across his face. He smoothed it back, but there wasn't enough oil to hold it. Service, he said. Lizzie's in service, I said. So she is. But Dar says it would be unfortunate for me to be in service. Mr. Mitchell looked at Dar, who shrugged and smiled. When you grow up, Esme, I think you could do whatever you wanted to do, Mr. Mitchell said. I want to be a lexicographer. Well, this is a good start, he said, pointing to all the slips. Mr. Mailing and Mr. Bulk came into the scriptorium, discussing a word they had been arguing about the day before. Then Dr. Murray came in, his black gown billowing. I looked from one man to another, and wondered if I could tell how old they were from the length and colour of their beards. Dar and Mr. Mitchell's were the shortest and darkest. Dr. Murray's was turning white and reached all the way to the top button of his waistcoat. Mr. Mailing's and Mr. Bulk's were somewhere in between. Now they were all there, it was time for me to disappear. I crawled beneath the sorting table and watched for stray slips. I wanted more than anything for another word to find me. None did, but when Dar told me to run along with Lizzie, my pockets were not completely empty. I showed Lizzie the slip. Another secret, I said. Should I be letting you bring secrets out of the scrippy? Dar said this one is a duplicate. There's another one that says exactly the same thing. What does it say? That you should be in service, and I should do needlepoint until a gentleman wants to marry me. Really? It says that? I think so. Well, I could teach you needlepoint, Lizzie said. I thought about it. No, thank you, Lizzie. Mr. Mitchell said I could be a lexicographer. For the next few mornings, after helping Dar with the post, I'd crawl to one end of the sorting table to wait for falling words. But when they fell, they were always quickly retrieved by an assistant. After a few days, I forgot to keep an eye out for words, and after a few months, I forgot about the trunk under Lizzie's bed.